I still remember the day my world shattered. It was the kind of day you'd think would bring people together, my father's funeral. The air was thick with grief, the kind that presses down hard on your chest, making it hard to breathe. I was kneeling by his casket, trying to hold onto the last bits of strength I had left when I noticed something strange. My wife, Lisa, wasn't crying. Instead, she was whispering into the ear of someone I'd never seen before, my best friend Tom. They looked too close, too familiar, and that uneasy feeling crept up my spine. The funeral was supposed to be about saying goodbye to my father, but somehow it turned into the day I saw something I'd never expected. Lisa was supposed to be grieving with me, holding my hand, offering comfort. Instead, she was sneaking around with Tom behind my back during the most vulnerable moment of my life. Later that evening, I confronted her about it. I waited until the funeral crowd had thinned out, then I pulled her aside. My voice was hoarse, my throat dry from the shock. "Who was that guy? Why was he whispering to you during Dad's service?" The question hung in the air, thick and accusatory. She looked caught, her face flickering with guilt, but she quickly masked it with a forced smile. "It's nothing, just a friend from work." Her words sounded hollow even to me. I didn't buy it for a second. There was a flicker of something in her eyes, nervousness, maybe shame, and that's when I knew I'd been blind for too long. Over the next few days, I couldn't get the image out of my head. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her whispering, giggling with Tom in my living room, hiding their secret while I grieved my father. It was like a punch to the gut, a betrayal so deep I wondered if I'd ever breathe normally again. I felt sick. My stomach clenched, my palms sweat as I replayed the scenes, trying to piece together how long they'd been seeing each other behind my back. One night, I decided to do some digging. I knew their routine enough to predict when they'd be alone. I waited until late, then slipped into the house quietly. I didn't want to make a scene, at least not yet. I just needed to see for myself. I went straight to the living room where I found a pair of shoes I didn't recognize by the doorway. My heart kicked into overdrive. My fingers trembled as I picked them up. They were small, feminine, and definitely not Lisa's. There was a faint scent of perfume I didn't recognize, too sweet and floral, unlike her usual scent. My stomach twisted. I looked around, trying to find more clues, and then I saw the small, crumpled receipt on the coffee table. It was from a nearby cafe bought just a few hours earlier. The date matched up. I stared at it, feeling numb and furious all at once. I had the proof, the physical evidence, that Lisa had lied, cheated, betrayed me while I was drowning in grief. The sting of betrayal hit me hard, sharper than I expected. How could she do this? How could she hide it all from me? I kept the shoes and the receipt as silent trophies, knowing I'd need them for what was coming next. I had enough. Enough of pretending everything was fine. I wasn't just going to walk away from this. I was planning my revenge, and I wasn't going to stop until she felt the full weight of what she'd done. The pieces were in place, and I knew exactly what I had to do, but I had to be smart. Revenge isn't about acting on impulse, even when every fiber of your being screams for justice. It's about making them pay without giving them the chance to undo your work. I had a plan forming, something cold, calculated, but effective. And I was going to make sure Lisa never forgot what she did to me, not for a long, long time. As I sat in the dark, the evidence clutched in my hand, I realized this was only the beginning. I had all I needed now. All that was left was to execute my plan carefully, precisely, and without mercy. She had taken enough from me. Now I was going to take something back, something she wouldn't expect. "Tell me if you want me to keep going." The next few days were torture. I kept the shoes and the receipt hidden in a small box in my desk drawer, but I couldn't shake the image of her with Tom. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her laugh, that stupid, knowing smile she'd worn while whispering in my father's house. My stomach churned with a mix of rage and disgust. I didn't sleep much. My mind spun with plans and questions I wasn't ready to answer. But I knew one thing: I wasn't going to let this go, not without consequences. I started watching her more closely, pretending everything was normal. I needed to understand her routine, what she was hiding, how deep her betrayal went. She was still acting like the same wife, smiling, pretending to care, but I saw the flicker, the brief hesitation when she thought I wasn't looking. She was hiding her guilt well, but her eyes betrayed her. I saw her glance at her phone more often, her fingers trembling slightly when she thought no one was watching. One evening she was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables, humming softly. I leaned against the doorway, trying to stay calm. My heart hammered in my chest. I finally broke the silence, voice low and steady. "Who was that guy, Lisa? The one you whispered to during Dad's funeral?" She froze, her hands tightening on the knife. Her breathing was shallow, but she kept her composure. "I told you, just a friend. Tom's a friend from work," she repeated, voice a little too quick. I took a step closer, crossing my arms. "That's funny, because I found a pair of shoes in the living room that aren't yours, and a receipt from a cafe I didn't even know was nearby." My voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of everything I'd been holding inside. Her eyes widened just a little. "Okay, so maybe I made a mistake. It's not what you think." I shook my head slowly. "It's exactly what I think. You lied to me, betrayed me while I was mourning my father. Do you even realize how much that hurts?" She looked down, her shoulders sagging. "I didn't mean for it to happen. Didn't mean to." I interrupted, voice rising slightly. "That's the worst excuse I've ever heard. People don't cheat by accident, Lisa. You did it because you wanted to, because you didn't care about what I was going through." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked like she was about to cry, but I wasn't in the mood for tears. I was in the middle of a storm, and I needed to finish what I'd started. I told her, "You're going to regret this, Lisa. I don't want to just walk away. I want to make you pay for what you did." She looked at me, the guilt etched deep in her face. "What are you talking about?" I took a deep breath, trying to steady my voice. "I've been planning. You're not going to like what's coming, but you deserve it. You won't see it coming, and by the time it hits you, you'll wish you never crossed me." Her eyes filled with tears, but I felt a strange calm settle over me. I knew what I had to do. I had gathered enough proof. I had the shoes, the receipt, and now a plan. A plan to make her understand the pain she caused. It was time to turn her own game against her. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the shoes. "These are your reminders," I said softly, placing them on the counter. "And the receipt, that's your evidence. I'm going to use everything I've got to make sure you regret this. Not just for me, but for my father's memory." Her voice broke as she whispered, "Please don't do this." I looked straight into her eyes. "You should have thought about that before you lied, before you betrayed me. You're not getting away with this, not without consequences." I turned and walked out of the room, leaving her standing there, trembling. That night I stayed awake, going over every detail of my plan. I wasn't going to confront her yet. No, I had something more in mind, something cold, calculated, and effective. I wanted her to feel the chaos I'd been living through, to see what her lies had caused. I was going to make her regret every second of her betrayal, even if it meant wrecking her world in the process. The next step was clear. I would execute the plan in a way that left no doubt. She needed to know she'd broken something that could never be fixed. My mind raced with ideas, and I knew I was ready. All that was left was to put it in motion. Tell me if you want me to continue with part 3. The plan started forming in my head like a dark, precise blueprint. I realized that revenge wasn't just about making her feel guilty or exposing her, though those things mattered. It had to hit her where it hurt, in a way that she'd never forget. I wasn't interested in petty tricks or childish games. I wanted her to understand the depth of her betrayal and what it cost me. First, I needed to make sure she felt watched. I started installing small, discreet cameras around the house. Nothing obvious, just enough to catch her in the act if she tried to hide anything. I'd been around enough tech to set up a couple of miniature Wi-Fi cameras, hidden behind books, in the corner of the living room, and even inside a small clock on her bedside table. Not that I had to spy on her constantly, but I wanted to have options, an ace up my sleeve. Next, I dug into her phone. I wasn't about to invade her privacy without reason, but I had to know if she was still hiding things. I discreetly installed a tracking app when she wasn't looking. Her habits, her routines, where she went, everything. I knew that if I was going to do this right, I had to have evidence of ongoing betrayal, not just a one-time slip-up. One evening, I sat in my garage, my phone in hand, watching her movements on the live feed. She was in the kitchen making coffee, oblivious to the cameras. I felt a weird mix of satisfaction and sickness. This was the moment I'd been planning for, the moment she realized I was serious. I was going to make her regret every lie, every sneaky whisper, every stolen moment. Meanwhile, I kept the shoes and the receipt tucked away, knowing I'd use them at the right time. I also arranged for a private investigator to follow her after work. Nothing heavy-handed, just enough to confirm if she was still involved with Tom or anyone else. I wanted concrete proof, not just suspicion. I was going to make her face everything she'd been hiding. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became how deep her deception ran. She'd been sneaking out to meet him, exchanging messages that disappeared quickly, trying to cover her tracks. I saw the texts, flirty, familiar, intimate. My stomach clenched every time I read a new message. I'd played it cool on the surface, but inside I was boiling. So, I decided I was ready. I'd wait for the right moment when she'd let her guard down, probably when she thought she'd gotten away with it again. That's when I'd strike, not with anger but with cold, calculated precision. I'd show her I knew everything. I'd turn her own secrets into her punishment. One night she left her phone on the kitchen counter while she went to the bathroom. I snatched it quickly, her back turned, and checked her messages one last time. I saw enough. It was time. I pulled out the shoes and the receipt, carefully placing them in a small, waterproof bag. I was ready to make the final move. I knew that confronting her directly might cause her to deny everything or, worse, destroy evidence I had collected. No, I had to be strategic. I waited until the next day when she'd be at work. I called a lawyer I knew to prepare some official-looking documents, just in case I needed them. I also contacted a friend who was a private investigator. Together, we plotted the exact moment to reveal everything. But I wasn't planning to reveal everything all at once. I wanted her to unravel slowly, to realize that her lies had been exposed in ways she couldn't undo. I'd leave the shoes and the receipt somewhere she'd find it unexpectedly, maybe in her purse or her car. A silent message, a final blow to her hidden world. When I finally set the trap, I'd be there, ready to confront her with undeniable proof. I wanted her to see my face when she knew I'd caught her. I wanted the moment to be unforgettable. This was the beginning of her downfall, and I was just getting started. I'd made up my mind. She would pay for what she'd done, and I'd make sure she knew exactly how much damage she'd caused. No more hiding, no more secrets. Just the cold reality of her actions and the consequences that followed. Tell me if you want me to continue with part 4. The day I finally put my plan into motion felt like walking a tightrope, every step deliberate, every breath measured. I had everything ready. The shoes, the receipt, the evidence I'd collected over days. My heart was pounding, but I kept my face calm, almost detached. I didn't want her to see how much this was shaking me, not. Yet timing was everything. That morning I left for work early, pretending everything was normal. Inside my pocket I kept the small bag with the shoes and the receipt, ready to drop it somewhere she'd find it. I told her I was going out for a meeting, but really I was headed to her car. I parked a few blocks away, out of sight, and slipped the bag under her windshield wiper. It was discreet enough that she'd notice it pretty soon, but not so obvious that she'd suspect I was involved. The waiting game was the hardest part. I watched her through the live feed I'd set up, seeing her go about her day as if nothing was wrong. Her face looked more tense than usual, and she kept glancing at her phone. I could tell she was nervous, wondering if I knew. I'd made sure to turn off notifications on my end so she wouldn't suspect I was watching, but I was glued to the screen, feeling every second stretch into eternity. Then around noon, I saw her finally find the bag. Her face froze in shock, eyes darting around, then narrowing in anger. I saw her wipe. Her hands on her jeans, hesitating for a second before pulling out the shoes and the receipt. She looked at them like they were poison, her cheeks flushing with rage and guilt. I could almost hear her thoughts, the realization sinking in that I'd found her out. I had prepared myself for her reaction, but nothing quite prepares you for seeing your wife, the person you trusted most, caught in the act like that. She snatched the shoes and the receipt, then stormed into the house, slamming the door behind her. I stayed in my car, a mix of adrenaline and satisfaction rushing through me. It was done. Now all I had to do was wait for her to come out. A few minutes later, she appeared at the front door, clutching the evidence. Her face was flushed and streaked with tears, eyes blazing with fury. She looked directly at the house, then at her phone, then back at me through the window. I could see her lips trembling as she fought to keep her composure. She finally stepped outside, clutching the shoes and receipt like weapons. "Did you think I wouldn't find out?" She spat, voice trembling. "You've been spying on me." I stepped out of the car slowly, keeping my voice even. "No, I just knew you were hiding something. I had my suspicions, so I checked. And what I found, well, it's pretty damn clear." Her shoulders slumped for a second, then she straightened her spine. "You're crazy. You're just making this worse." "Worse?" I repeated. "You're the one sneaking around behind my back. While I was mourning my father, you and Tom were doing God knows what." I took a step closer. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to pack up your things. You're leaving tonight, and when you do, don't bother looking back." Her eyes welled with tears, but her voice was venomous. "You think you've won? This isn't over. You're just angry now, but you'll forget. You'll get over it." I shook my head slowly. "No, I won't forget. I'm not the one who betrayed the trust built over years. You did that, and I'm done pretending everything's okay. This is just the beginning." She looked at the evidence in her hands, trembling, then looked up at me with pure hatred. "You're going to regret this. I swear you'll regret it." "Maybe," I said quietly, "but I'd rather be alone than stay with someone who lies and cheats on me. You can keep the shoes, the receipt, everything. It's all a reminder of what you lost and what you threw away." She dropped the evidence onto the porch, her face contorted with rage and heartbreak. Then she turned without another word and went inside, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. I watched her through the window, feeling a strange mix of relief and emptiness. I'd done what I set out to do. I'd made her face her lies. As I walked back to my car, I felt the weight lifting just a little, but I knew this wasn't the end. There would be fallout, questions, maybe regrets, but I'd taken control finally. I'd taken back some part of my dignity, even if it was just a small piece. That night, I packed a bag, ready to leave, knowing this was the only way forward. I was done with her lies, done with the betrayal. I was closing this chapter, strict, final, and cold. Sometimes you just have to take action. No more waiting, no more explanations, just a clear line drawn in the sand. I was done being the victim. Time to move on with or without her. Would you like me to continue with part 5? The silence after she left was deafening. Her absence made the house feel emptier than ever, like a ghost was lurking where she once stood. I spent the evening sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the door, waiting for her to come back, to argue, to plead. But she didn't. Instead, everything just fell into a strange kind of calm, almost eerie, like the world had paused, waiting to see what I'd do next. I knew she'd try to reach out, call, text, maybe even show up at the house. I kept my phone silent, not because I didn't want to hear her, but because I had already made my decision. I wasn't going to let her guilt trip me back into a false sense of reconciliation. I'd already crossed the line. The only thing left was to follow through. I grabbed the small bag I'd prepared earlier, clothes, some essentials, a few personal things, and placed it by the door. I took a deep breath, feeling the cold grip of resolve tighten inside me. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming my life, my dignity, and my peace. Before leaving, I called the lawyer I'd enlisted. I knew I'd need legal help, something binding to make sure she couldn't twist this around. I explained everything, the proof, the evidence, the plan. She listened carefully, then told me what steps to take next. No emotional words, just cold, professional advice. I appreciated that. I needed clarity, not more chaos. As I packed, my mind kept replaying her face, her anger, her tears, the betrayal in her eyes. I felt nothing but a strange sense of relief mixed with annoying guilt I was trying hard to suppress. This was necessary, not just for me but for my sanity. I had to do this to finally move forward. When everything was ready, I went to the front door, took one last look around, then handed over the keys to her. I left her a note, simple but firm. "You crossed the line. I'm done. Don't try to contact me. This isn't a second chance. Goodbye." I put the keys on the table, stepped outside, and closed the door behind me. The cold air hit my face as I walked away from the house, each step feeling heavier than the last. I didn't look back. No point. I knew this was the end of the chapter, my final act of reclaiming myself. I had handed her the keys, the evidence, and my trust, all in one move. Now she was on her own. Driving away, I felt a strange mix of liberation and emptiness. It was like finally ripping off a bandage that had been bleeding for months. My stomach was tight, my palms sweaty, but I was finally free from the suffocating weight of her betrayal. I knew I'd miss some parts of what we had, but I also knew I'd never go back. Not now. I took a deep breath as I turned onto the highway, heading toward a new beginning. The pain still lingered, but it was different now, less raw, more manageable. I realized that sometimes the only way to truly heal was to cut the cord and walk away, even if it hurt like hell. That night, lying in a cheap motel, I finally allowed myself to breathe. I looked at the ceiling. Empty but hopeful. I'd done what I needed to do. No more secrets. No more lies, just me starting over. And that, I think, is the best revenge of all. To walk away stronger and clearer, knowing you finally took control of your life. Because in the end, no betrayal can stand up to the power of a person who refuses to be broken. Would you like me to complete the final part, part 6? In the days that followed, everything felt surreal. I couldn't shake the image of her standing in the doorway, clutching the evidence, rage and heartbreak etched into her face. Part of me wanted to reach out, to tell her how much she'd hurt me, but I knew that wouldn't do any good. She had made her choice and I had made mine. The only thing I could do now was move forward, unshackle myself from the anchor of her lies and betrayal. Living alone for the first time in years was a strange relief. The house was quiet, almost too quiet. No more footsteps in the hall, no more whispered secrets behind my back. Just silence and me, finally free from the chaos she left behind. I threw myself into rebuilding my life, focusing on work, friends, and the small pleasures I'd neglected during all the chaos. I also scheduled a session with a therapist, talking about everything. My grief, betrayal, anger helped me realize that I'd been carrying a weight I didn't deserve. I started to understand that I'd been living in a kind of fog, blinded by love and grief, ignoring the signs that she wasn't who I thought she was. It hurt to admit that, but facing it was the first step toward healing. One evening I sat on my porch watching the sunset paint the sky in fiery hues. The air was crisp and cool, and I felt a strange sense of peace settle over me. I thought about everything I'd been through, the betrayal, the revenge, the heartbreak, and I understood that I'd survived it. Not just that, but I'd come out stronger. The pain had carved out a new version of myself, more cautious, more aware, but also more resilient. I remembered her words during that last confrontation, her anger, her accusations, and I couldn't help but smile. She thought she was winning. She thought she could crush me with her lies, but in reality she'd only exposed her own weakness. I realized that the greatest revenge wasn't in hurting her back, but in moving on without her, in showing her that my life was still worth living, even after her betrayal. I finally let go of the anger that had consumed me, replacing it with a quiet sense of closure. I knew I wouldn't forget what happened, but I also knew I wouldn't let it define me. I was done being the victim. I was taking back control, piece by piece. My future was mine again. Looking back, I see now that this whole ordeal taught me something vital. Trust is fragile, and sometimes the biggest act of strength is walking away from someone who has betrayed you. Revenge is tempting, but real power lies in reclaiming your life, your happiness, your peace. And I did just that. So if you're ever in a situation where someone been unfaithful or betrayed you, remember this. You don't have to play their game. Sometimes the best revenge is simply walking away with your head held high. Because at the end of the day, the only person who can truly hurt you is the one who can take away your peace, and you're the only one who can give it back. I closed my eyes that night, took a deep breath, and let the quiet fill me. The past was behind me now. The future was uncertain but open, waiting to be shaped by my own hands. And for the first time in a long time, I felt hope. Not because everything was perfect, far from it, but because I finally had control of my own story again. That was all I needed to keep moving forward.